As far as opinions in the anime community, it's a pretty cool take to say that 2022 was one of the best years anime fans had in the last decade. It felt like every season there was at least 4 to 5 smash hits generating hype from almost everyone at least remotely invested in the anime community. Attack on Titan got its long awaited Season 4 Part 2, bringing us closer to the end of the series. Bleach came back for the Thousand Year Blood War, allowing new and old Jed fans alike to rejoice in the new season. Cyberpunk Edge Runners broke the internet, winning the Crunchyroll Anime Awards. Thorfinn got to have his cathartic line animated in Vinland Saga Season 2 as well. At the same time, Eminence and Shadow had the community laughing at the refreshing take on the isekai genre. Summertime Render was a sleeper that didn't disappoint. Martin took over the world in My Dress Up Darling, and Blue Lock got me to care about soccer. Mob Psycho concluded with Season 3, Call of the Night was a brief beauty, K-On! Received its spiritual successor in Bocchi the Rock, and that's not even all of it. There was Spy Family, Licorice Recoil, Tomodachi Game, Love is War Ultra Romantic, Made in Abyss, and so much more. But despite all the heavy hitters we saw in 2022, and all the excitement across the wider anime community, there was one show that seemed to be inescapable. A show so unanimously anticipated that in terms of hype generated, it's hard to describe or quantify a full 2 years later. That show is, of course, Chainsaw Man. I'm going to be 100% honest and upfront with everyone here. I hadn't read or really cared too much about Chainsaw Man when it first came out. While I was aware of the premise and thought the power system was interesting, I wasn't initially compelled to watch or research. Devils just seemed like curses to me, and seeing Denji Aki in power gave me the vibe that it was pretty much just another shonen. And as an aside, Makima wasn't enough of a pull for me to watch the series. However, there was something else that appealed to me. I'm a writer, self-published author, and a lover of all good stories, and 2022 anime is a year that taught me so much about writing. The stories were so incredible that it was hard not to learn, and so with all the knowledge I had acquired, I couldn't help but satisfy my growing curiosity. Anything that society points to as a brilliant story, I simply cannot resist. However, I felt like it could be put off for a bit. After all, there was so much to watch. All the while, though, I could always feel the crowds chanting about something I was missing out on. And then I started to notice something. I was pretty unsuspecting of Denji at first, and again, not to front with any of you, the idea of a man pulling a cord attached to his chest to grow chainsaws out of his arms just seemed odd. But then I saw him appearing on my Instagram feed, panels of the manga out of context along with various people expressing their hate or general disdain for the series' main character. And then a single comment sent me on a research trail in order to find out exactly what was going on. I don't have a screenshot of it as it was something I saw only in passing, but the sentiment was very clear. I don't really like Denji. He has no ambitions. And that didn't put me off to the story. It made me want to understand. Because in the world of shonen, Luffy wants to be the Pirate King, Deku wants to be the world's greatest hero, and Naruto wants to become Hokage. There's a rule that almost expressly says the shonen MC must have ambition. And all the sentiment I saw surrounding Denji told me one thing. Denji isn't like that. Which in turn meant Chainsaw Man broke a very important, fundamental rule. And when one of those are broken, the story that follows is either a masterpiece or a train wreck that cannot be saved. And I believe for Chainsaw Man, what happened is the former. The way that the internet characterized Denji was a loud, aimless kid who couldn't really care much for anything. All he wanted was to eat and get a girlfriend. He was a simp lapdog who played into the hand of Makima simply because she was an attractive woman. He was just another stupid teenage boy, one that couldn't control his lust or desires, one that had no ambition, and one that the people hated. In fact, it almost looked like the internet enjoyed memeing his personality. A lot of young men from the ages of 16 to 22 would jokingly say they related a lot to him. After all, they liked chicks and whatever else Denji was into. But as I looked into Denji and peeled back the layers of his character, what I saw was so much more than just another teenage boy. I saw something tender, deep, and painful, and so unremarkably human that I felt it was a shame that the internet experienced Chainsaw Man and walked away laughing at or hating on Denji. Now, to say that Denji has no desires is an over-exaggeration, but before we get to all that, let me paint a picture of what life looks like for Denji. Denji is 16 years old. Maybe. He doesn't know on which day or year he was born. Both of his parents died, and his father left him behind a debt of nearly 40 million yen. For us Americans, that's roughly $250,000. Because of this, he's needed to sell one of his kidneys, his right eye, and even one of his testicles to pay off the debt. And in order to try to pay off more, Denji works as a devil hunter alongside his pet devil, Pochita. The job requires Denji to frequently risk his life day in and day out in order to kill devils, which are the manifestations of people's fear. And he's been doing this since maybe 10 or 11 years old. He gathers the money, or he dies. That was the threat bestowed upon him as a child. Throughout the first episode, there's this sense of intense melancholy. It's not enough for the show to feel outright depressing and sad, because Denji is cheerful, and it almost makes us want to root for him, to let him know that life will get better. But as the audience, we feel the same sense of hopelessness. So we watch him dream and talk about his perfect day, how he'll eat toast and jam for breakfast, then flirt with the girl later on that day. He'll play video games with her, and the two will fall asleep innocently in the crackling light of the game's screen. Denji's life is so messed up and clouded with so much hopelessness that he considers a good day one where he comes home alive and shares a piece of plain bread with his pet devil. The pet, mind you, serves as Denji's only source of positivity and hope. It almost feels heartbreaking. We watch Denji talk about eating buttered toast and jam toast as something he can only imagine. How getting a girlfriend is a pipe dream that can't happen in his lifetime. And so later on in the episode, when Denji and Pochita both get mutilated and killed, it almost feels fitting. Except there's a catch. Pochita, the only thing that Denji has ever had, needed to sacrifice its life to restore Denji's heart. The only expense being that Denji must try and live out his dreams, only without Pochita. He lashes out in a blind rampage, killing the zombie devil throughout the night until morning. In Denji's short life, he has known nothing but pain and misfortune. And now he's lost the only thing that has ever brought him any joy in this life, his pet Pochita. And it's at this time, his lowest, without anything or anyone, that he's the most susceptible. For the lucky few who find themselves at the bottom, grasping for any arm that will reach for you, there may be a hero on the other end. But for many, and for Denji in particular, the arms that caught him, embraced him, and helped him return to being human, weren't the arms of a hero. But back on topic. I want to do a video covering Makima in her entirety, touching on why she's one of the best psychological horror villains I've ever seen, but for now, just focus on Denji. He's just been caught by a beautiful woman, a woman who promises that she'll feed him food in the morning, toast with jam and butter, coffee, and even dessert. Everything that he's ever wanted in exchange for working under her, or he can die. Denji crosses that barrier and obtains the first thing he's ever wanted. A good breakfast. Okay, so boom, what's next? Denji's life is now pretty much perfect. He lives in a home sheltered completely from the wind and the rain and no longer needs to pay back the debt of his father. He can eat as much toast as he wants, can shower in warm water, and has a bathroom and clean bed to call his own. Denji is now living a dream life, and for most of us with a roof over our head and food to eat, it seems almost mundane. But to Denji, this is the equivalent of Luffy becoming the Pirate King. It's his end goal, and now he must move towards something else. And naturally, next on the list would be getting a girlfriend. Except there's an issue. Denji doesn't really understand his emotions. Not only is he a male who generally has a harder time with emotional intelligence, he was also never trained in emotions. Even in something like the middle class with children that come from two-parent homes, kids are often untrained or poorly trained in their emotions and their IQ. But we'll come back to Denji's lack of emotional awareness in a second. For now, let's talk about his current goal, scoring with a girl. This panel was memed to the moon and back. And out of context, yeah, that checks out. These are the grand ambitions of a shonen hero? Certainly not, and funnily enough, he receives this goal as well. After going with power to save her cat Meowie, he receives his reward, and well, it was alright. Denji finds this encounter disappointing. Not like anything he would have guessed. It doesn't really feel like anything special. If this was Denji's endgame, and Luffy's endgame is to become the Pirate King, it would be like if Luffy made it to the end and was let down by what he expected. To Denji, he's just experienced one of the best things life has to offer from his broken perspective, and it did nothing for him. This sends Denji into a depression. After all, anyone who's worked hard and fought for something and then received it can probably relate to this sense of disappointment. That realization of, well, that's it. This section is played for laughs, and I believe it cleverly hides away what Denji is really experiencing. Chainsaw Man is good at that, covering up something much sadder with a sillier, funny filter, so when we see Denji going through the motions, it feels sad, but it's just so superficial and ridiculous that we don't see what Denji sees. It's almost like you can see the gears turning in his head. Almost like he's thinking, well, if that wasn't what I thought it was, getting a girlfriend, playing games with her, and everything else, are those just disappointments waiting to happen as well? And once again, at his lowest, Makima is there to mold him. She shows him that physical desire is one thing and that love and connection is something completely different. She teaches him about desire and emotional intimacy, showing him that he doesn't really want what he thought he did. What he wants is to experience love, and now he knows that he has always wanted that. The ability to love and to be loved, to understand and be understood. And Denji walks away with a renewed perspective on life, and something else to work toward. The boy who lived in a shack with no food and a single pet had been given a taste of affections back in episodes 1 and 2, and he blindly chased after what he thought would give him more of that affection. Denji is a character that is overwhelmingly nuanced. That term is often thrown around in media analysis without people really having a grasp on what it means, and if you want a more detailed dive, I have a Medium article linked in the description for you to read. But in this summary, I define nuance as the subtle expression of inconsistency. To highlight this, let's go back and look at this panel once again. Except this time I've removed the words. Denji is alone in a poorly lit room. Trash litters the foreground, and Denji himself is crouched over in the center of the shot. The focus is on him and his despair. Like we've established Chainsaw Man often does, there should be text here that hides away the true nature of this image, and what Denji is saying should be able to contextualize this somber panel into something funny, drawing humor between the contrast of what's being said and what's being seen. But this time, I've taken that text away, because what Denji says here isn't actually what he wants. He just can't express it. Not yet, at least. Denji doesn't say what he really wants, and even if he did, he doesn't really have the emotional intelligence to express that. If we use the context we get from later on in the series, Denji doesn't actually want physical connection, but rather real, authentic love. And so the text would look like this. And suddenly, the panel is not as funny. It's tragic and heartbreaking. A boy who's never known love and warmth desperately wishing he could have that love and warmth. And this is what it looks like for a character to be nuanced. Denji says one thing, but he means something completely different. I want to eat toast with jam becomes I wish I didn't sleep hungry, which further becomes I wish my life was stable. And I want to score with a girl becomes I wished somebody loved me. And Denji becomes much less of a joke with no ambition, but a broken person who simply cannot understand life. And I believe this is what people see when they say that they love Chainsaw Man, or at least love Denji, whether they know it or not. With our shifted perspective on Denji, let's go back and look at everything that people could possibly relate to now. During 2021-2022, we were fresh off the heels of the pandemic, and the youth at large was starting to recover from their isolation. The economy had been whittled down to a shadow of what it was a few generations ago, and so a mass of youth aged 16 to 21 had their exodus out of their most tender years of their life being alone and needing to navigate an increasingly difficult world. Here's a chart showing the median house price, gross monthly rent, and house price scaling from the 60s to 2018. As you've probably guessed, things didn't get much better over the pandemic. Basic things that our past generations might have thought were givens, such as a family or owning a home with a stable job, are now pipe dreams to the newer generations. On top of that, Gen Zers aged 18 to 26 already are strapped with an average total debt of nearly $30,000. So it's not hard to see how a mass generation of people could relate to Denji. A young boy alone and isolated, forced to pay off an incredible debt, navigating a cruel and unforgiving world. Further than that, the general hopelessness captured in Chainsaw Man can get darker. The male loneliness epidemic is largely touted in society as something that all men experience but few rarely talk about. And this goes beyond romantic relationships, even into just normal friendships like we see with Denji. The decline for men has always been incredibly steep, as 15% of men say they have no close friendships, and it's not surprising that healthy masculinity is on the decline. We focused on other causes that I might add are important and shouldn't be pointed to as part of the problem. And I don't mean to draw the line between genders and say that one suffers more than the other, because while the male loneliness and successful suicides are higher by statistic, that doesn't mean that the suffering is contained there. It stresses across everyone, and it makes no discrimination. And in the next section, we'll be going a little bit into the most overt and explicit content available in Chainsaw Man, a trauma that has affected men and women alike. It is not a gender-specific issue. It is a human issue. Denji has been essayed several times throughout the story of Chainsaw Man. He has been, is a victim of, and continues to be a victim at the hands of the stronger and more powerful woman in Chainsaw Man. The story is distinctly interesting with the way it handles this idea, because it treats him pretty much with the same dismissiveness as other male victims in media. Once again, I don't mean to belittle the essay statistics in regard to women. The numbers show that the majority of victims are women. That isn't the point I'm making. What I'm saying is that within media, essay of a man when committed by a woman is either played off as mutual or as a joke at the expense of the male character's masculinity or dignity. It's usually seen as funny or lucky, as the male character should be grateful for getting a score. Switch the genders of these scenes where Denji is a victim to predatory behavior, and it's suddenly a bit more overtly disgusting. An older man in his mid-20s preying on a 16-year-old girl. It has a much more sickening connotation, and by using women, Fujimoto is able to conceal a little bit of that stinky content. I wish I could say that Chainsaw Man fans saw through this, but of course they either don't, or even worse, they do see, and still choose to make jokes and point fingers at Denji. There's an excellent pair of YouTube videos by the YouTube channel Pop Culture Detective about this exact topic that goes into detail of things much more explicitly and in depth. But the point is that the internet has treated Denji in much the same way the story or real-life male victims are treated. If you go on the majority of posts on IG or Twitter regarding scenes where a woman gets aggressive with Denji, the comments are usually filled with the people saying he's lucky or that they wish they were Denji. It should be known that the vast majority of times this happens to Denji, he doesn't consent to any of it. Many times the story frames Denji as unsure or going along because of his misunderstanding of the relationship between emotional and physical intimacy, which was altered by Makima in Season 1. Never is this more clear than in Chapter 168, where after being assaulted, Denji asks if that means that Asa likes him, to which she replies, "No, I only did it because it felt good," before going on to confirm she has no interest in Denji as a person. And just take a look at the state of Denji on page 9 or 15 of 168. Does this look like the face and the body of someone who's lucky? Denji's relatability and his victimhood are ways for Fujimoto to express to the reader this grand sense of struggle. He is oppressed, victimized, and used not just by the characters within the series of Chainsaw Man, but also by its viewers and readers. While it's true that statistically not everyone has been a victim of these exact situations, the idea that life is hard and you're unable to properly express it while the world laughs at you is something that happens and something lots of people have experienced. And it happened to Denji. The internet saw the worst moments of him and decided to water his character down to a single panel and a couple character traits, in the same way many people feel their issues are pushed to the wayside and ignored. Toward the beginning of Chainsaw Man, Denji is likened to a dog, someone that barks and obeys without question, a pet on a leash, someone who gets abused, pulled, shamed. It's also often used as an insult to describe someone's lack of personal integrity, how they simply do whatever they're ordered to without a single thought of their own. And when we meet Denji, that's exactly how he is. But over the course of the story, we see Denji learn. He starts to understand the idea of romantic connection and friendship, so much so that later on in the manga and anime, he's made friends. Power affectionately clings to him on his shoulder, the two having fun in the way siblings do. They take care of each other. Aki makes sacrifices and takes care of Denji and Power, and Denji starts to figure out how to give and take not as a lone person, but in the context of having a family. Because even though Power is loud, doesn't eat her vegetables, refuses to flush, and doesn't shower, she's his family. And despite Aki's colder personality, he deeply cares for his irate siblings. This is what makes them comforting Power in the wake of her terrible nightmares, or the three simply eating together so homey and comfortable. Because we watch Denji go from a shell who doesn't understand safety, love, or connection grow into someone who can choose, someone who is able to love and be loved by the family that's around him. Throughout the story, we watch a dog learn to become human. And that is the beauty of Denji's character. And if the internet wants to just latch on to the shallowest parts of him and make their judgments without looking deeper, then there's nothing that can be done. I've seen the argument used that if you need to look deeper into a character, the character is therefore poorly written, and I couldn't disagree more. Chainsaw Man taught me about the nuance of a character, and the tragic state of life itself. And so whenever I hear someone or I see a comment that reads, "I love Denji, he's just like me," I can't help but wonder which Denji they're referring to. The tragic one the story gives us, or the one that the internet twisted to serve their comedic jeering. Maybe it's a little bit of both. I thought about ending this video on a happy note, but Chainsaw Man is not a happy story. It's about life, love, heartbreak, sorrow, and death, and I believe its appeal is largely because of that. Life can get challenging, and sometimes things don't get better. Other times they do, and then once again they get worse. It's a dance of give and take, push and pull. And that is the beauty of Chainsaw Man. Because no matter how bleak a painting, it's only visible by the lighter tones that give it form, even if those lighter tones themselves are faint and barely noticeable. Denji is a fantastic character and really a masterclass in nuance. And I believe there's a lot to learn from this story if you're a creative person, or if you're just someone who's learning to be a bit more human. Until next time, keep dreaming.